la bestialidad imperialista. Bestialidad que no tiene una frontera determinada ni pertenece a un país determinado. Bestias fueron las hordas hitleristas, como bestias son los norteamericanos hoy, como bestias son los paracaidistas belgas, como bestias fueron los imperialistas franceses en Argelia. Porque es la naturaleza del imperialismo la que bestializa a los hombres, la que la convierte en fieras sedientas de sangre que están dispuestas a degollar, a asesinar, a destruir hasta la última imagen de un revolucionario, de un partidario de un régimen que haya caído bajo su bota o que luche por su libertad. Y la estatua que recuerda a Lumumba, hoy destruida pero mañana reconstruida, nos recuerda también en la historia trágica de ese mártir de la revolución del mundo, que no se puede confiar en el imperialismo, pero ni tantito así, nada.
Yo, what's good, everybody? Welcome to episode 10, Unmasking Imperialism, exposing imperialist propaganda in mainstream media. Today, we're talking about the role of music in propaganda, more specifically, the role of background music in promoting capitalist, imperialist, racist ideology in corporate media and mainstream media, getting us to support the agenda and the interests of the ruling capitalist class without us even knowing about it. Very subtly, very low-key, very chill, but it's influencing us. And we're going to go in depth into background music and how there is a double standard that exists in the use of background music when we're talking about causes and countries that are in favor of socialism and anti-imperialism and sovereignty, and conversely, countries and causes that are right-wing, conservative, settler. And joining us today is one of my good comrades, B-Level of Ewoks Unhinged, a 21st century socialist channel. Please subscribe to Ewoks Unhinged. This is a really great comrade of mine, somebody who I speak to pretty often and has some really great content on his channel. We've done a lot of great streams together about MK Ultra, imperialism, sovereignty, everything. So please subscribe to his channel. How's it going, comrade?
Hey, thanks so much, Ramiro. Yeah, everybody had some really great chats with Ramiro. I think he's even got a playlist on his channel of Ewoks appearances that he's made, and we went deep on a lot of topics that a lot of people don't talk about, like you said, like MK Ultra, imperialism, around vaccine hoarding, very important topics. And I'm really happy to be on the program today. This subject that Ramiro picked, it's a really interesting one because there's so much in our lives with how imperialism is just blasted at us. That's subliminal. That's not like on its face. It's not on its head, but it's in the background, and it can be as effective or even more effective. And that's what makes it so nefarious. So yeah, I'm excited for this conversation today. Check out the channel Ewoks, and yeah, Ramiro, feel free to continue the discussion.
Yeah, most definitely, man. It's really cool to talk with you because a lot of the conversations we have on your channel are coming from a position of regular working class people. We're not some stuffy academics. We're not some, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we're just regular dudes, working class dudes, immigrant families from the hood, from, like, we're just regular people. And it's cool to be able to have those conversations because a lot of conversations about socialism and media and things like that tend to be reserved for the stuffy academic types or like wealthier left champagne socialists.
Right.
And it's cool to be able to talk as well because we don't have any interest or NGO funding or backing behind us. We're just able to have a conversation. Shout out to Big Teal who's watching and listening, by the way. So basically, to kind of kick off this discussion about background music in propaganda, I think that something that has to be clear is I'm coming at this, and I'm sure Comrade B-Level agrees with me as well. I'm coming at this not from a position of neutrality or unbiased, right?
Yeah.
There's a difference between being objective and being biased. So what do I mean by that? When you're objective, you're pointing out a real material fact, a real life fact. Today is May 29th. I'm subjective, I'm a communist, even though I have a view that I'm a communist, I'm anti-imperialist. That's subjective to me. I'm pointing out an objective fact that today is May 29th. We can all, even if you're conservative, libertarian, whatever, we can all agree that it's May 29th. But my subjectiveness is my political views. And so in a lot of imperialist propaganda that claim to be objective, neutral, that claim to have no bias, they will use subtle cues and subtle techniques in film to very softly and carefully guide people toward a certain opinion. And today we're going to be focusing more on background music because I think it's one of the subtle ways in which the imperialist media will guide people. Because a lot of the mainstream media, like I studied journalism in undergrad and communications, and they would say like, you know, we're neutral, we don't take sides. But then you watch their documentaries and their film, and they use background music in a way that makes you believe a certain thing. And so, for example, for countries and figures and causes that they're against, they'll use very scary music. They'll use very dark music, you know, like, and we're going to play some clips in a bit.
Right. It's just like, you know, if you're watching something like Star Wars, right? You know, when the Empire comes in, they're rolling that Imperial March, but when it's the Rebels, it's like this like triumphant trumpet kind of sound. It's all feel good. And they do that exactly with the media that we're shown about socialist states versus the imperialist states. You know, one of my favorite video essays ever on YouTube is done by a history channel called Untitled Films. He's a dude who used to work at like Gettysburg and different forts and stuff like that. And he did an analysis on a film that I haven't even seen called Gods and Generals, which is about the Civil War. And he identifies how the film claims to be quote unquote fair and balanced, showing equal amount of time with both sides of the conflict. Yet when it shows the Confederates, it's very triumphant music. It seems very heroic. It meant to uplift the spirits. But when it shows the Union, it's very dull, very boring. And so like there's nothing really inspiring there. So somebody, they're getting an equal amount of time shown with each side and how each side interacts behind the lines. But the feeling that exudes from the coverage is way different. And it is meant to subliminally push the viewer towards the lost cause side of that film. So that was a really interesting video essay. Untitled Films, highly recommend people check it out if they want to know how that type of propaganda goes into stuff like history movies and things like that, and definitely applies to what we're talking about today.
Yeah, definitely. And it's just like, it's one of the, I also remember after 9/11 when they would show images of like US troops bombing the crap out of Iraq and Afghanistan, they would play this heroic music as well. And it's designed to create a certain emotion and to make you support this war. And so we're going to be looking at, I have 4 clips that I want to play that I think are going to be interesting to everybody who's watching and listening. And the first, just to put it into context, right? The 2 sides that we're going to compare are the settler colonial state of Israel, which right now, as we speak, is murdering, destroying indigenous Palestinians on their own land and is bombing the crap out of Gaza and innocent families, a settler colonial state, Israel. And the other side is the DPRK, or aka North Korea, a sovereign anti-imperialist country that follows socialism, Juche, Marxism, Leninism, and is resisting. They have zero homelessness. They don't have racist police. They're not a settler occupying state. They're just people building their own sovereignty and building their own liberation. And they're treated very differently in media, and background music plays a big role. Before we get into playing some of the clips, Comrade B-Level, what are some things that you've noticed when it comes to how media present DPRK, especially with some of the music?
Yeah, so, you know, one point to build on the previous example that I said is often there's, I forget the word, I think lying through omission, where you choose what what you choose to film becomes your audience perception. So, for example, we talked about sanctions in one of our previous podcasts before,
Right.
and often, and I think you gave the example. It's like the imperialist like punches somebody, then they film the person writhing on the ground in pain, and they're like, "Look, that person's so sick," but really, what happened was they got hit, and that's how they're reacting to it. So they often can go to various countries that are being sanctioned and film what are the devastating effects post-sanction versus how things would have been previously. And so that's a real effect, not just with the DPRK, but with any state that's an enemy of the empire, how they seem to show, oh, look, it's a societal breakdown. Socialism never worked here or anywhere. And so, but they don't show the accomplishments of socialism. They don't show like the when things are working smoothly, you've got clean streets, like you said, no homelessness, things like that. They're never shown to the West. And a simple example too of the lying through omission is the in that Civil War movie, for example, for the Confederate side. And again, this wasn't actual footage of the Civil War. This was a reenactment. But theoretically, if we did go back to film this war, you could probably get footage throughout the whole war where you don't film any Confederate saying any bad or racist thing, theoretically, right?
Yeah.
So whereas the Union, like they film it where they make the Union guys almost look more racist in kind of like the liberal way or something like that. So in that film, there are no racial slurs said at all by the Confederates, but there is one said by the Union. And what's really interesting about that is, you could probably go up to two sides and film only the good parts, only the parts where they're not being nasty, and then portray that as that's the reality, when that's just what you chose to film, what you chose to show people, to make a horrible cause look as lionized as you want. So, like with socialism, they often show things looking very militant, right? And that's scary, authoritarianism. But they don't show like people like having a good time at life. They don't show what you showed in your documentary of folks making food and produce, not this GMO crap, but like real healthy fruit and vegetables, dragon fruits. They don't show that, right?
Yeah, it's always like the stiff people, and they never show the conditions that force people to become a militant society, which is like another. And that's a great point, Conrad. I mean, there's so many techniques, and background music is just one of them. So I want to show you the first clip.
There we go. Sorry, I went a bit off topic there, talking about like
cool.
this camera and stuff, but it's so
it plays a role
the
too.
Video format. It's so intertwined, and then of course what you choose to show paired with the background music seems like this dystopian, like District 9, 1984 type situation.
It's exactly. It's a sum total combination of the music, the shots, the people they interview. And so I think this clip that we're about to show, this is from 60 Minutes Australia. This is a good example of what you're talking about. And so this is like, if you look up daily life in DPRK, right? This is one of the first and newest videos that comes up, part of mainstream media, and it plays into this narrative. And so we're going to hear, pay close attention to the background music that they use, because that really sets the tone for the rest of the video.
Ever seen. As we head inside the world's most secretive state at a time of unprecedented tension. Who is the enemy?
American Yankees.
American Yankees. To visit a place like that, it was almost a bit of we'll just have a go and ask if we can come in one day, assuming that they'd say no. And I literally heard...
He looks like such an asshole.
Nearly 2 years.
They're showing he's afraid of kids. Just play video games.
Right.
American kids do that too.
Oh yeah, we've finally found your application to come to North Korea. Yep, you can come in for a week to Pyongyang. And I honestly thought it was a stitch up. An ever-present team of minders carefully monitors our every move on a highly orchestrated tour led by government official Ju Jong-hyuk.
The problem is that most of the Western people have no idea what is going down here. They don't know the reality of our country.
North Korea wanted us to see only what they wanted us to see. You know, there was no chance for us to.
They cut that
walk
guy
the
off.
Streets.
Yeah,
if we turn up in most cities
they
in
did.
the world, we can go for a walk, and if we want to shoot something down the road, we go and shoot it. If we want to go and talk to someone on a corner, no problem. In
Kids
North Korea,
smiling.
you basically
Yeah,
get
how
put
is
on a
this
bus.
scary?
They drive you to a
They're on a
location.
field
So
trip.
get out.
Right.
You've got 15 minutes to film here. Get back on the bus, and then you're not allowed to film, drive you to a new location. Okay, you can film this, get back on. We weren't under any illusions that this wasn't some sort of propaganda tour. We're on our way 200 kilometers east to the city of Wonsan, a bumpy 5-hour
Oh, that piano
journey.
note.
The piano.
That's that one piano note right there.
We stopped briefly at a coffee shop where the walls are plastered with pictures of North Korean missile launches. They were trying to show North Korea as very much a progressive and happy country, and for us it was trying to, where we could, peek through the cracks and actually see behind the facade of what really goes on in North Korea. No
Yeah,
matter
kids
how
working out.
old or young,
Yeah.
everyone here marches to the beat of the
It's called
regime.
sports.
Yeah. Look, family values.
Right.
Seeing nothing. We can interpret what we see and try and explain
Nothing
to
of
our
this is
viewers
threatening.
the different lay of
Right.
the land over there. North Korea is genuinely still one of those frontier locations that people really have no idea what goes on behind the curtain. What are you teaching these boys? Do you teach them the technique?
I teach guerrilla warfare,
Yeah.
tactics Kim Il-sung used to vanquish the Japanese army.
What's striking
Pretty
is
cool.
that the children
That's pretty awesome.
also
Yeah.
see these games as practice for war. What do you like about this game?
What's Call of Duty? Like,
Call of Duty, exactly.
So you dream this is an American that you're shooting?
CNN did the same segment with a different guy.
It's just a copy and paste segment.
Yeah.
It was at the height of the nuclear missile standoff between North Korea and America, and you know, tensions were high before we'd even set foot there. From my perspective, the thing that scares a lot of people is the fact that you are now armed with nuclear weapons.
I think that
So is the U.S. and Israel.
none at all. No threat at all. But there is one threat. It is one threat in the world. It is from
America.
not DPR Korea, but from Donald Trump. So I think that we must get rid of this threat. We must get rid of Donald Trump, I think.
I think there was more tense moments there than I've got fingers on my hands. Wonsan is one of the regime's key missile test sites. Almost
You hear the
40
music?
have been fired from this area.
like James
as
Bond
North
level
Korea,
stuff.
or DPRK, develops its capability to strike targets around the world. They are still at war. No peace treaty has ever been declared between North Korea and the Western powers on the other side. So they basically.
So that's some of the clip.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you hear some of the music, right? It's like this weird. I like
Yeah.
Comrade Big Teal mentioned it too. He's like that one piano key. It's like,
Yeah, that was the most poignant note for me there. You know, actually, I felt like the most intense part of the clip, and you know, I have someone before who's listened to a lot of like heavier music and stuff like that, and often the most intense parts of songs aren't where things are going the hardest, but when there's kind of that in between space, there's a bit of
Right.
a slow down time for tension, and I felt like that in his bus ride. It's like this tension, like you're not seeing anything, it's just countryside, but you're wondering like what lies beyond mass graves, and like that's
Right.
like it's alluding that there is something horrific beyond the horizon that he can't see. It's almost like that's basically what this is. It's trying to fill the imagination. You can't even see anything bad, but it's
Right.
trying to give the inclination that there is something bad that we're not seeing, that's outside of the blinders of the tour that they're being given.
Exactly, and it's designed. That music is designed to instill like anxiety within you,
Yeah.
to feel on edge, right? Like, oh my God, what's gonna happen next? What's gonna pop up? I don't know. It's like a
Right.
scary movie, and just like the way I think you raised a good point as well during the clip. Like they just totally cut off the guy as he was speaking. They never show Kim
Yeah.
Jong-un like talking for himself. They never show, and it's like they say things in a way that like they're technically true, but it's like, duh. Like, for
Yeah.
example, when they're like, you know, these children are practicing to shoot troops in this video game. Ooh,
Right.
and it's like, oh my God. But then it's like, wait a second. We do that in the US, Call of Duty, like you said.
Yeah, way more
and in
graphic.
Canada. And
more
and in those
graphic.
games, there's scenarios that designed to like kill like people in other countries as well, right?
Yeah, like it really, those games, like I never liked those games even when I was younger. I think there's one game where you can actually play as the Soviets and fight the Nazis, and that's pretty based. I'm actually surprised they even allowed that plot line. But then they're like all those modern warfare ones, it's all just imperialist propaganda. It's and it's to brainwash kids to thinking this is cool that you're doing action hero stuff. And speaking of action heroes, at the end of that clip, it was trying to portray Kim Jong-un. Like, if anyone's ever seen a Bond movie, which are super cringe, but if anyone's seen Bond, that oscillating sound of like the tension, like ratcheting up, it's like trying to portray him like a Bond villain, and that like back and forth wobbly sound, like it really is meant to like say like he's about to unleash his plan to destroy the world or something.
Right. And even like the imagery, like the children, like that image of the children exercising in a group and wearing the same outfit and doing the same moves, that's designed to reproduce this racist stereotype about Asians being brainwashed, about being just like thinking the same and homogenous. They're not creative individuals, you know. They're not like
Alex Jones. I remember he was pushing for this like xenophobic like hive mind theory or some wild stuff like that, right? Whereas really it's just kids that got good coordination because they're getting healthy, they're getting physical education, and America is just not used to that, unfortunately. You know,
and even the context, because it's like the U.S. bombed the fuck out of Korea and killed over 3 million people between 1950 and 1953. Of course, they're gonna be practicing how to, like in their game, like that's part of the culture. If you're in any country and 3 million of your people were killed by foreign invaders, like that's gonna be part and parcel of your culture, you know.
Definitely that survivor. That's like Juche, it's all about surviving. And we're gonna look at Israel next. And what's interesting is you never hear people in the West question Israel or South Korea for that matter about having conscription for people, about having mandatory service, I think for men in both those countries, right? I think it's women too in Israel, I'm correct. But I think it's men in South Korea. You don't hear anybody in the West accuse these countries of saying, oh, look, they make men be in the army for like 3 years. Yet with North Korea, they're like, they can't have an army. And yet people still acknowledge them as the quote unquote hermit kingdom since the USSR fell as their main trading partner. They don't really acknowledge, like they do acknowledge actually that they're isolated, yet they don't acknowledge their right to defend themselves facing tons of aggression. And also I wanted to point out too, Japan has way more advanced, way more gruesome and violent video games. You don't see them going into Japan doing this expose of like these games of people getting cut up in all these ways and stuff, or the American games. Like legit, like that's that gun game that the kids were playing. It looked like one of those things that like a laser tag,
like Dave and Buster's or something.
Like it was just some like it was just like this really low tech, like it looked like something from like the early 90s maybe. Like it wasn't hyper realistic graphics, you know. And then they're like, look at how violent this is. And it's like, out of here.
It's just crazy like how they are able to frame. And so this next clip that we're gonna play is again, I just literally looked up today like daily life in North Korea or DPRK, and then daily life in Israel. So the first one we just played is DPRK, right? And that's the scary music and all that. This is one of the ones that came up for me from mainstream media, daily life in quote unquote Israel. And then pay attention again to the music that they use, because that sets the tone for the video and how we view it.
And it is beautiful.
They showed food. That's they showed. Everybody loves food, you know?
Right.
Rainbow flag too. There we go. It's woke.
It's woke.
Like this is food. Like everybody loves food. No one's
Everybody loves food. It's
You guys know
humans,
how much I love
hipster.
any meal that is
Yeah.
like a combination of a ton of flavors, and you just choose your own adventure. This is that. We have like falafel. We have 2 tzatziki's that have like a yellow curry and a red.
All Arab
curry in
food,
them.
by the way. None of it
Yeah.
is just
Almonds, eggplant, egg, hummus, bread. All right, we had our fantastic breakfast, our very
the
strong
colors,
coffee, and now
like
we're
the
looking for
Yeah,
pants.
it's bright.
For this
it's
guy,
It's
bright.
saturated.
Sweatpants.
Well, I forgot to pack pants.
oh god.
Are these like vloggers or is this like state propaganda for?
Nah, this is like one of the main videos. Like if you look
Okay.
up daily life in Israel.
Daily life. Consumerism.
Yeah.
Johnny finished speaking, and we are stopping in for a quick bite and dessert. And this guy's so nice. He's just showing off all his skills. And this food looks so good.
And the music is like this creative, like hip, like
Yeah, very
oh my
like
god.
very like Williamsburg-esque.
Williamsburg, they just drank like a vegan fucking latte.
3 of these, 2 dessert and 1 dinner one.
I didn't need 4.
But there's 2 dessert and 1 dinner one. Why didn't
Oh
we do
god.
2 dessert?
It's like
2
we
dinner-
said, they'll never show socialist
dinner
countries
ones
making food
and
or
one-
Right,
people.
right. Exactly.
Are you gonna answer or no? I can't hear
These
this
are
woman
so good.
speaking.
They were like
It's just
a-
like,
Chapati.
oh hell no.
but incredibly
My man said
flaky,
chapati, nah.
like a croissant, and very, very, very salty. And then you can get it.
But yeah, like I saw
Yeah.
that's just a clip of that. But I just wanted to show that because like the music again, right? It's like lo-fi. It's this chill hipster coffee shop, creative.
Right.
It's not dark and scary. And again, like this is on YouTube, which is different from like TV, right? I think the media landscape has changed in the way that like people who are traveling, like let's say if I'm like, am I gonna travel to Israel or Korea? And you're looking at these videos, it's like
right.
obviously that's gonna frame it in one way versus DPRK in another. And so I don't know, what are your thoughts on how the background
like,
music in Israel?
It's huge. I was even thinking about it in your intro where Che was doing the speech, and it's got that cool lo-fi music with the pan flute kind of mixed in there with the beats, and it's super chill. Now, meanwhile, you could get imperialists, take that same Che speech, and have like Lord of the Rings music playing or something like that. All scary, right? And like they, like it really influences how people view a scene. I actually got my start in YouTube just doing some fan mashups, some meme videos of like Star Warsy type like fun joke stuff. And one of the key things that I would do to change the context of a scene was change the music.
Right.
If you want to take a really crazy intense scene and make it seem happy, you play some lighthearted stuff over some intense like lightsaber hacking or whatever. You want to take something that's really boring, make it interesting. Something that's scary, make it fun. Something that's not fun, make it right? Like it really is the way to change the context of how somebody sees a scene. And so much of video-based memeing is off of soundtrack changes and stuff. So it's totally applicable to the propaganda and how our brains subconsciously register the information. Like even the dude on the bus in the previous video, he's just looking at a field, right? It's pretty sunny. It's like no worse of a day than in the Israel video. Yet they're playing this tension music, like, trying to make you think of mass graves and nuclear holocaust and all this stuff. But then, you could easily have played some happy-go-lucky, like snapping type, type music and feel good. And you'd just be like, it's a nice bus ride. I want to go to North Korea.
Right.
I want to go work. I want to go like, play the games.
Right. And it's a good
it was
point.
A sunny day. It was a sunny day. It wasn't cloudy. It wasn't stormy. Nothing with the weather. Because again, these crews, they can't really control the weather where they go, depending on how long they're staying. So they just got to go with what they get. But the music is an ample way for them to change the tone sonically.
I just picture the editor being like, we need something a little more dark. And they're just like, they just start putting some shitty music. But yeah, and it's crazy. It's a good point as well, because I was thinking about laugh tracks, right? The role of laugh tracks in media and shows, sitcoms. Like I grew up in the 90s, you know what I'm saying? Like I grew up watching sitcoms and TV, and there was this thing called the laugh track. I'm sure I think some of the Zoomers probably not as familiar with it because it's something that is very quintessential of the 90s. And what you have with the laugh track is that it they have a fake studio audience. It tends to be like dead people from like decades ago, from 60s, a pre-recorded laugh track of a studio audience laughing at certain jokes. And what that does is it sets the tone. It tells you like, okay, now you laugh. This was funny.
Yeah.
Or this wasn't funny.
It really influences what you think is funny. So there's a joke that you might on your own not laugh at. You know what I mean? But with so much prolonged exposure to a character having certain behavior or joke, you might end up like thinking, oh, that was kind of bland, but now I think it's funny because it goes with the flow and the tone of the show. Where non-laugh track shows, it's really up to the viewer and then who they're watching the show with. Did they think the joke was really that outstanding or not?
Yeah, and one of the things that's interesting too is that in Latin American media, I'm not sure if it's like this with South Asian media, but like in Latin American media, one of the ways it's used, unfortunately, in novelas and sitcoms is whenever it's like a dude or somebody who is dressed as a woman or is trans or LGBTQ, then the laugh track comes on. Like whenever like a guy would dress up, like there was some sitcoms.
There was a lot of that with American media in the 80s and 90s and stuff. And I think that's peeled back now in the last maybe 10 years. But like you can even look at media in the late 2000s or even early 2010s where there were still transphobic remarks and things like that. But yeah, it's really unfortunate how, and even you can look back in different areas of media where they have a racial stereotyped character that was just there to be made fun of and stuff, and how things like that they're cued to be the jester or what have you. It's really unfortunate how we can see how imperialist media is made to prop up power hierarchies, stereotypes, bigotry, and all that.
Right. Yeah. No, it's crazy. But so there's this third clip. So check this, right? So I got a video. This is from somebody on Instagram named Jaka Parker. So this video that I'm about to play, it's about DPRK, daily life in DPRK. Okay. However, the original video had no music. It was just pure street sounds. There was no background music. I added background music. I added a lo-fi chill. I literally just Googled like chill, lo-fi, upbeat music, and I added it to the clip.
Right.
Just to see like the difference of what we're talking about. So let me play that clip now. And this is in DPRK. This is street life in DPRK.
Nyari yang ada orang yang makan.
So the vibe is much more chill. He's getting food.
And the weather is way worse in this footage too. It's like snowy, it's cold. Like I live in Canada, so I know what type of day that is, right? But it's like, that's pretty chill.
Hold on, it's kind of janky. Hold on.
Aku satu dong.
My Wi-Fi is like slow as fuck. My fault.
I have a lot of difficulty playing clips on streams. Like it always bungles the audio for me.
It's always like,
yeah.
But yeah, you got the point.
Yeah,
it's so much more chill. It's people eating. Like if I were to watch that, I literally just slap the music together with the video, and it just totally changes the mood.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And just like how you said, what you focus on, because who doesn't love food, right? Who doesn't love like? And so the fact that in the first clip of DPRK, it's like the children working out, all serious and shooting, and the second one is people just chilling, eating, and then some chill music in the background. it just shows like how much of an influence background music plays.
Yeah, you contrast that to the first clip, and people think there's no food in this country. Like it's just everyone's really really skinny. People actually lean there because they're eating healthy. That's probably a big reason. I mean, during famines, of course, people can have like worse situations. Famines brought on by sanctions, mind you.
Right.
But yeah, like people look at the first one and they're like, there's no food here. But then they see the Israel video and like, oh, like they got food that's bountiful and plentiful. And because if someone's traveling, what's one of the main things they want to do? They want to try the local food. They want to experience food that's different than their own. And, and if you just think it's just this barren land, you're probably not going to be inclined to go there. And also be inclined to believe narratives about food supply in said countries.
No, definitely. And it's one of those things that are so important to keep in mind whenever we're consuming media, because for every one positive or normal video about anti-imperialist countries, there's going to be like 10 or 20 that have the scary music, that have the military parade shots. And it's just one of those things that we have to keep in mind. And so I actually, conversely, this fourth clip, this is a clip of life in Hebron for occupied Palestine for Palestinians, of the side of quote unquote Israel that you don't see in the media, of police harassing Palestinians. And again, this clip doesn't have any music. The original clip doesn't have any music. I added music. So I looked up dark, scary music and I added it to this clip because that's what they do to the DPRK clips. You know what I'm saying? So I did that.
Reverse the role.
I reversed it. Exactly. So let me just play a little bit of it.
احكي معي عربي او انجليزي بعرفش عبراني يوم يغلق لي تحت روح احكي معي عربي جيب له العويل اكيد لو تستاهل لي ما ينام لو مو مفغى لي بعض فاني اتصور
So that's just part of it. My hair is being mad crappy today, but you get the sense of it. You feel it, right?
Voting, like you feel like, oh, like are they gonna? You feel like they're gonna punch the dad. Then you see them walking towards the kids, and you're like, you're on edge, right? And that's something interesting too. That like the officials in the Korea video. We're being very respectful to all the people around. We're here. It's like you said, it's like a settler colony state. They're intimidating people. They're like armed to the teeth. When just regular folks are in their normal clothes, they're not militants. They're just regular people.
Yeah, and it's just it also like plays into just the difference in treatment in mainstream media between non-white anti-imperialist countries and white imperialist aligned countries like quote unquote Israel, and just showing the difference. And what I wanted to ask you, Conrad, is like, when obviously you are somebody who haven't been a communist your whole life, it took me a while to get into socialism and communism. What were some of the first spells that you fell for, like in imperialist media, that looking back, that you're like, holy shit, I can't believe I believe that?
Yeah, so like, because this stream obviously was going to be more of a chill one when we talked about on emails, but as I got more thinking about it, I started going deep, actually. And by the way, anybody watching, this was a question that we didn't pre-plan. Like Ramiro's just asking me this on the spot right now, but I was thinking about this going in. Like I was thinking about like just my upbringing in Canada, because the legacy of the Red Scare here and the anti-communism is a lot stronger than people might think. People used to think of America being very right-wing, being very like my country, right or wrong. But Canada is very anti-communist. The education system here is actually meant to, like, I swear, the history textbooks and everything, the ones that I was taught, were the ones, they're meant to make you think communism's worse than Nazism, which is wild. Wow. Like, especially as I've developed my class consciousness and my brown consciousness, and as both those have developed in me, I look back at stuff that, like, as a person of colonized background, I'm like, how the heck are they leveling this stuff as freedom?
Right,
Like they usually level during the Cold War. They didn't actually level it as capitalism versus communism. It was freedom versus communism. That's how to most people it was leveled as. And it's wild. When we look at whether we're looking at like South Asia or Africa or Central and South America, like to make it think that the systems that were opposite of communism was freedom is laughable. It truly is laughable. I think luckily with I guess my own family background, I was able to have like some context to know like someone like Winston Churchill isn't a good guy, but he's somebody that's lionized in Canadian society, and he's somebody that literally wanted to do famine, like legit man-made famine on my peoples, and yet he's lionized like as some anti-fascist when he's just some racist imperialist hack of a dying empire.
Definitely.
I think the wildest thing I believed was that socialist states were authoritarian and that liberal democracies weren't or were less authoritarian. I think that's the wildest thing that I believed. Because the more you look into it, the more you realize and this isn't even just with imperialism abroad. You look at home. Whether it's Canada or the US, the way different racialized groups are treated, the way indigenous people are treated. That's authoritarianism. Like, you're going to tell me that's not authoritarianism, It's wild. And also, too, just myself, just growing up in Canada, and as you become more of a man, and the way if you're like a racialized man, how some people might look at you and stuff, it also kind of clues you into just like feeling like, hey, like I'm just a regular guy. Like I'm not a threat, but some people might see just regular people as a threat. Also clues you into like, there's something whack about this system. Like, why is it that people have to like not walk tall or not look threatening, quote unquote, when they're just being themselves and stuff and being totally respectful. And, and I think as we look at instances of police brutality, as we look at instances of like the Standing Rock protest, stuff that's being filmed like in HD, everybody's seeing this now. It's really difficult for the imperialists to keep the narrative that this is just this liberal haven, that everybody gets along and we're all happy here, because that's the way America was leveled to the rest of the world during the Cold War. Like the people in the East Bloc, some of the younger folks coming up in the 80s who didn't live through World War II like their parents did, or didn't live through other forms of rightist monarchism or tsardom the way their grandparents might have. They saw these idealized version of America, blue jeans, rock and roll, Coca-Cola. They thought they was all great. And then, when they went over to America, they realized, wait, like, where's the social security? Where's the safety? And, the East Bloc, there's an increased amount of like police state post Soviet Union, actually, because in the Soviet days, people were looked after by and large with a lot of the baseline services. You take that out from people, crime rockets up. So the police states are more present in these quote unquote liberal democracies than they were when they were socialist states. So I think that's the big thing, just the relationship of quote unquote authoritarianism with socialism and capitalism. And Dennis Rodman, when he came back from North Korea in 2013, he was doing this interview with George Stephanopoulos, and he talked about the American prison system. And he said, we have prison camps here too, because they were accusing North Korea of having prison camps. It's like, we have prison camps here too. And George Stephanopoulos had the nerve to laugh at him about that. God. And a lot of people, because like it's only been like in terms of the mainstream talking about prison reform, that's pretty new in the mainstream, like the last few years or so, like the documentary The 13th that a bunch of people watched that had no clue about the prison system. A lot of people will probably reflect on Rodman's comments like 8-9 years ago and go, wait, he was like on point.
Yeah, he actually was making a good point.
Yeah, but at the time, there were many people that are still clued out of, how vicious the American penitentiary system is. And I think now it's just like there's way more discourse on how authoritarian America is domestically, because so many people knew this, that's their life, right? But America tried really hard to push that we're the land of Coca-Cola and the Statue of Liberty. And, we ended slavery hundreds of years ago and tried to cover up all the legislation that's, luckily is being talked about more and more now. But for a while, there was this whole, like in Canada, we even had a post-racial narrative for a bit. But I don't know more. The Indigenous movement just smashed that wide open, because how could a country be post-racial when there's a segregated society? And again, like I said, like there were instances when I was growing up with my dad, right? Where we probably encountered racism, but I was just a little kid and I didn't realize it, and you just like, oh, that person's mean. Why is that person mean? Then you grow up and you see a pattern, you're like, oh, wait. And then it clicks, unfortunately. But yeah.
And I'm glad you mentioned like the jeans and the Coca-Cola and the branding, because I think music plays such a big role in cultural imperialism abroad. There's a great quote by a Chilean communist and musician. He's very famous. I suggest folks look him up if you get a chance. His name is Victor Jara, and he was a communist. He was in the Communist Party of Chile. He was one of the most famous musicians of Latin America in this genre called Nueva Canción, which means new music. And that represents that communist theme of the time of the new man, the new system, the new art and culture that represents revolutionary values. It's not subjected by capitalism, by imperialism. And Victor Jara talked about the importance of music and how the imperialists understand the inherent value of music, of how it can be used as a weapon to attack revolutionary movements, and how the imperialists appropriate it. And I feel like there have been so many genres like that. I think a big genre like that has happened is hip hop. Like if you look at the origins of hip hop, it was revolutionary. Like I'm born and raised in New York, right? And hip hop was born in the African and Puerto Rican community in the Bronx from Pan-Africanist revolutionary people who were connected to the Panthers, to the Young Lords, who had a house party on Sedgwick Avenue. Kool Herc, DJ Kool Herc, he's one of the OGs of hip hop. And at that time period, hip hop had a very anti-capitalist, anti-police, anti-imperialist nature to it. And it's interesting because we kind of had a conversation about this when we were talking about MK Ultra, where after the 70s and into the 80s, during COINTELPRO, during MK Ultra, the FBI used hip hop music and began promoting drug use, began promoting crime, began promoting lyrics that promoted capitalism and consumerism. And it's interesting because companies like Death Row Records, Columbia Music, all these major music labels, they would give contracts to hip hop artists that were promoting this sort of capitalist and imperialist lifestyle, drug use, and they wouldn't give it to revolutionary artists who were talking about overthrowing the system. And so not even just background music, but music itself is used as a vehicle for promoting capitalism and imperialism. And I don't know, what are some, like, have you noticed that as well? Like just the infiltration of capitalism?
Yo, I feel you there for like music is like, like it's like that too with, I think in all kinds of genres that have kind of a rebellious, dissident strain to them. Because we saw prior to hip hop with rock and roll, what was elevated? It was the drugs, sex, like that type of partying, like that type of rock and roll, where the more dissident stuff was pushed underground, and you got like punk and hardcore, a bit of metal, stuff like that. And I feel like even in like something like hardcore, which is the kind of second wave American offshoot of punk, it's had a dissident energy, an anti-establishment energy. It wasn't always left or right per se, but I've noticed the more revolutionary strains of the music have been kind of like all but forgotten today, where today it's just posturing, it's just bravado, about moshing, and you don't get that message that hits, because there were a lot of right opportunists that took over a lot of revolutionary parts of it. Like the straight edge movement, which could have been revolutionary, got co-opted by right opportunists and people that basically want to do the whole like conservative angle of moralizing versus an actual material revolutionary sobriety type thing that really could have manifested there, which is really unfortunate. But yeah, like I see like the positive parts of hardcore are just like gone pretty much today. Like there are still some, but it's been defanged. It's not revolutionary anymore. And that's a music genre that never even got close to the mainstream. The thing that makes me actually the most sad is, both hip hop, hardcore, punk, what have you, they all are aggressive forms of music too, and and it's sad that we can't have revolutionary music that's happy. Like in the Nicaragua documentary, there's the dude just playing the guitar very beautifully, singing beautiful revolutionary songs. And, hardcore, it's like my favorite record is legitimately called Aggression, right? Like that's and I wish we could live in a society where the dominant force was a positive one, where we could just chill and sing about, the revolution in a happy way. But, it's like kind of an angst thing still. Right. As it's the ascendant force where we live.
Yeah, and even like a lot of the revolutionary hip hop groups that I like, Dead Prez being one of them, Immortal Technique, that's my boy. Like he has good music as well. And Dead Prez is like one of my favorite groups. Like they're just not as well known as other mainstream hip hop groups, and they have some really beautiful music. And it's interesting to see how the revolutionary energy of hip hop and also other genres as well, like Nueva Canción, which is new music, again, going back to the topic of Victor Jara, that was used in the coup attempts in Venezuela and Nicaragua. So in 2014 and 2016 and 2017 in the protest in Venezuela, they used all the revolutionary music from the 70s and 80s against the dictatorship. The right wing started appropriating that music for them and claiming that they were revolutionary, and they used it as part of their branding. And likewise in Nicaragua in 2018 during the protests, those music that the guy was playing, like the opposition was using that as well and trying to claim that as like the right wing music. And even now in Cuba, the National Endowment for Democracy and USAID and all these US aligned government NGOs, they're supporting underground anti-government hip hop groups in Cuba who are speaking out against communism, speaking out against the Communist Party and the government. And so it has this leftist veneer, it has this leftist appearance where it's like, oh, look at these independent hip hop artists speaking out against the government.
Right.
They're promoting capitalism, they're promoting US intervention. And so it's just one of those things, like music, the role of music is so important, and not just propaganda, but in regime change, because just by listening to having one well-branded pro-imperialist song, like that could totally change the landscape of culture and music, and just politics in general. And so it's just like, it's crazy to see that,
Yeah, like I've heard of like metal bands from like Taiwan and Hong Kong that are like pro-imperialist basically.
Right.
But it seems like metal, you think that's super dissident and anti-establishment or whatever. Meanwhile, you got the Megadeth dude on Fox News, but
right.
But yeah. Anyway, I could go on about like all the weird stuff in metal and punk and hardcore for a while.
Yeah,
but revolutionary music is powerful. Like I mentioned the Verse record Aggression. Like I listened to the songs from that pretty much every day through the pandemic, and it's like it's immeasurable, like what that can mean. That to keep your spirits alive. So it's without a doubt such a powerful thing when it's done right.
Yeah, definitely. Big Teal. Shout out to Big Teal who's mentioning Anatiju, Black Star. Yeah, those are some really great. That's the thing. Like, there's so many great, amazing revolutionary artists who are promoting beautiful music, but we never hear about them, and we really have to dig deep. At its roots, like rock and roll, hip hop, R&B, like they all have Black radical roots, revolutionary roots. Yeah. But you have to really dig deep and find it, and it's obscured by this corporate mainstream nonsense. Even the same thing with reggaeton today. Like reggaeton originated as like a Black genre of music, and now you have these white Latinos who are totally monopolizing that industry and promoting these corporate values. Back in the day, old school playero or reggaeton was just talking about like just chilling at the beach, just hanging out, and now it's like totally perverse form of what it used to be. And that's really what capitalism does in every sense. It perverts art, it perverts music, culture in so many ways that it's unimaginable. And
Yeah.
why don't you tell us a
Like-
little bit about I wanted to ask you, comrade, what is the revolutionary roots of punk? I actually don't know too much about it.
Yeah. So it's controversial, to be honest, because there were some leftist groups that actually called punk fascist in the late 70s in the UK. Now the reason for that was punk espoused anarchism more.
Interesting. Okay.
To some degree. Like, obviously, you had bands like the Sex Pistols that had the song Anarchy in the UK. They weren't very principled or well-read anarchists, but you get the next wave of the anarcho-punks like Crass, who were actually more serious about it, that were very anti-communist and anti-Nazi at the same time. So they got that horseshoe theory going on. So punk has always been anarchist, really. I would say at the end of the day. I do like a lot of the music still, but at the same time, I don't vibe to it as harder message wise, just because of where I'm at politically.
Yeah.
With the anarchist thing, liberty in America, a lot of the New York hardcore in the 80s had a right libertarian strain to it, even a patriotic strain to it. Like some of the bands were even pro-Reagan, believe it or not. Because the dude who was the vocals for the band Agnostic Front, he was a Gusano, right? So he was like very anti-Cuba, and so just like being anti-Castro, like that's influencing all the listeners, right, that are listening to that music. And so punk is like anti-communism, I would say, has actually been in punk like the whole time. There's very few, I would say, explicitly Marxist or Marxist-Leninist bands. There's like Refused, Man Lifting Banner. I still think Verse is Marxist. Some people say they're anarchist, but
what about Dead Kennedys?
Yeah, so that's one band that I didn't really listen to that much because it's kind of like a bit older for me. But they're kind of more like liberal, I would say.
Okay.
You get some liberals too, like the NoFX. That's another band I didn't really like that much either.
Yeah.
But so punk, a lot of it's pretty negative and complainy too. Like if you're a teenager, you can kind of vibe to it, but once you kind of become an adult, that's why I liked hardcore more, because hardcore was more adult, you could say. It was about more like real life working issues versus just being a teenager and not liking school or whatever. There was one point I was gonna say that I like totally forgot. Yeah, okay, I remember now. The biggest YouTuber that talks about hardcore specifically, because hardcore is not as mainstream as punk, is pro-capitalist. I've actually argued with him about Vietnam before.
Interesting.
And I've argued with him about other things because his wife's father was in the South Vietnamese government. So he always talks crap about Vietnam whenever it's brought up. And I'm like, dude, as a Canadian of like Asian heritage, Ho Chi Minh's a hero throughout Asia. Like, you can't be bashing him. Like, I get that your father-in-law had these experiences, but this is a revolution, like what the Vietnamese people did was incredible. And this guy just writes it off because of anecdotal stuff his father-in-law said. But he has a huge audience amongst kids that are getting into dissident music who are going to think negatively about the social state of Vietnam. And it's really negative. So it has inspired me to probably talk more about the music in the future, because so many kids are getting into the music and listening to this guy's videos and hearing socialism, not just vaguely, but very explicitly being trashed as like authoritarian. Like he attacked Rage Against the Machine, who are libertarian socials. They're not even like hard communists. And he said, their anti-authoritarian message is runs at odds with their support of communism. Like, yeah, these dudes weren't pro-Soviet. Okay, they were like new left type. Like, I think they support the Zapatistas and stuff like that. But they like Rage is some really good anti-imperialist songs. Don't get me wrong, but they were never really pro-USSR.
That's a great point. I want to ask you, because I think that's a great point that reflects our position as 21st century communists, as progressive like ML, people who are not solely identified by what we're against, but what we're for, right? We're a constructive socialist and communist. How do you feel like, that's interesting that you say that, because do you feel like it kind of reflects your change in music taste from like being what you're against and like you're angry and fighting, like how your politics are now? Because I feel like that's sort of the stage a lot of us on the left enter. We're like, we come in, we're like, fuck everything, fuck this, fuck that. Like, yeah, you know, and it taps into that.
I got a great example of that actually. The band Rise Against.
Yeah.
I really liked them in high school. Like they were the band that kind of hooked me from punk to hardcore. They're like a melodic hardcore. In the early days, they were a melodic hardcore band, kind of more like hard rock now. But they were really on point with the Bush admin and stuff like that in what they spoke about. But recently, 2 weeks ago, they dropped a video done by I think it was done by an anarchist or activist based collective. And it was called The Numbers. And it was kind of like a left populist themed video. And they showed imagery from the BLM protests and stuff. Really rad, right? Then they show protest of Asians protest. I'm like, sweet, it's like Stop Asian Hate, right? Like that's what it is. No, it's Hong Kong. And they started the video with the France Fanon quotes.
Oh my god!
Are you literally you're upholding a colonial grab of Hong Kong and starting the video with a Fanon quote? Like, get out of my face!
Oh
I was so disappointed. I added the band. I didn't want to do it because I loved that band in high school, and their records like Siren Song and Suffer in the Witness, I still think are great records. Yeah. But they become co-opted because they are a band, for example, that did make it big, that moved out of the punk and hardcore strata into the more hard rock, arena rock, Foo Fighters type level, and they're kind of detached from the working class struggle now, and they're kind of absorbing radical liberal talking points and think they're on point. They were pushing hard to vote for Biden, and it's like you're seriously going to show BLM footage and say vote for Biden when he was the architect of this whole thing,
right?
So you get to a point where I'm the same age those dudes were writing some of my favorite records back then. So I'm I have my own context politically. I've read a different set of books than they maybe did then. And I'm kind of moving past, I'll be older than them than when they wrote those records in a couple of years, So as they have evolved out of their views then, I've kind of evolved and moved past. I'm not the naive kid that's getting their politics from a couple lines of a song here or there. You're actually reading books, getting down into the nitty gritty of the theory and whatnot.
Yeah, it's a great point. And it's we have to constantly evolve and change what we listen to and consume because it definitely influences us. What we listen to, the same way what we put in our bodies influences our physical, what we put into our mind influences our mind. And I feel when I listen to that very high stress, I'm against everything, fuck everything music, it puts me at a state great, it gets you amped up against the system. But then, what about uplifting and fulfilling music that is able to put you at peace and make you feel good about building and constructing,
I'm listening to a lot of the lo-fi stuff now, and a lot of the chill, no lyrics type stuff. But, I still listen to bands like Verse that I think truly had a revolutionary message. I listen to a lot of the... I still think there are really good elements of the straight edge bands, as corny as they could be sometimes, as some of the bands could be really cringe.
Yeah.
But there are some good bands that were genuinely good people that came from rough situations that want to say, hey, we're not going to screw ourselves up. We're going to try to stay alive. That stuff I can get behind. That stuff, looking out for your friends, having a sense of honor and a sense of purpose beyond what this capitalist system instills into people. There's this great band, The Geeks from South Korea. They're a hardcore band there. Mad shout out. They've kept the band alive on and off for 20 years. You got all the K-pop going on. It's so hard to have a band going. They kept that little scene alive. Yeah. They've encouraged people to think critically about the alcoholism culture in South Korea. That's hard. That's a hard thing to do. That's a lot harder than being some straight edge band in Singapore where there's a death penalty for smoking. That's easy, right? It's easy to be status quo there, but to actually push against the grain against alcoholism in South Korea, that's difficult. That's a huge culture there, and that's truly dissident, and I respect that.
Dude, I'm glad you brought up K-pop because that shit, it's so cringe sometimes because I see them dressed like Black appropriation, those the hip hop, and they'll be it's just fucking
it's
cringe sometimes. Me, I was with my girlfriend Ophelia. We were eating at a Korean barbecue spot the other day. We're just chilling there, eating our food and just chilling, whatever. And the K-pop, they just have K-pop playing in the background. And we just start cracking up because they're all in basketball jerseys, wearing J's, wearing Jordan. And it's what the fuck? But the crazy part is that their skin, you could tell they fucking bleached their skin even more, You know what I'm saying? And so it's this weird dynamic where like they still want to be physically white, they want to have white features, but then they'll appropriate blackness when it just comes to certain things, clothes, and it's really odd, you know. Like I find K-pop really weird.
What's interesting too is Korean people. A lot of Koreans are actually a bit darker. They're a bit more brown, right? But they have the whole powder your face thing. There's even some bleaching. It'll make your skin crawl, man. Like, you know, because like it's sad too that colonization wipes away like natural beauty and stuff like that, and just people being themselves. And contrast that to North Korea. You know, I actually had a friend in high school who is South Korean and admired. They told me they admired how much the North Koreans, the free Koreans, embraced their natural beauty and their natural looks compared to South Korea, who felt they had to look more blonde or quote unquote American or white or what have you. And it's interesting too, the anti-black element in South Korea. Look at North Korea. I made a joke way back in the day that said Kim Jong-un did the most for Afro-Korean relations out of any leader. But look, like they're having a good time. They're respecting each other.
Right.
They're bonding over basketball in a truly camaraderie way versus this cringy K-pop video you were just playing, you know? Like it really shows how the Afro-Asian anti-colonial connection there is maintained in a socialist state in a way in the capitalist ones, in the Western imperialized ones, that has adopted some of the American racism, right? And has like kind of moved folks away from the solidarity they had at like the Bandung conference. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, in Indonesia in 1956, right? When like the famous Afro-Asian conference where everyone got together and said, how are we going to decolonize the world? Right. You know, because imperialism tries to like move groups away from each other and break down solidarity and make groups hate each other and stuff. And
it's funny cool that
to see socialists push against that.
Right. It's funny to see also when there was like the Olympics, I think in South Korea or something like that, and the DPRK came and they had a team and they did a K-pop performance, and then you see the DPRK people like, what the fuck? Like they were like, whoa, like what have you done to our music, you know? And it's just crazy to see like the different levels of, and I think that's what like that's something I think about a lot. I'm like, how do we get socialists and communists to be music producers, to be artists? Like, I think that's something that we need, like moving forward, right? When we're talking about constructive socialism, it's like we have to get to a point where how are we going to compete against like corporate hip hop, corporate punk, corporate, you know, everything, every genre, corporate reggaeton, like, and liberate those genres and use it for our importance. Because I think that's one thing that the boomers did a little better, the generation, than we're doing. Like even in that era, the 60s and 70s and 80s, like they had more revolutionary artists, I feel. And nowadays we're kind of stuck with this corporate garbage, you know, and it's a lot harder to compete. And we need more communist, anti-imperialist artists out there, like really putting out good work. And that's something I think about a lot, you know?
Yeah, that's a really good question, man, because like that's one of the positive things that I do really admire from punk and hardcore is the independent spirit. And it's more in that genre than it is in metal, for example. But in punk and hardcore, independent records was so big. DIY was so big. And that's something that even though the genre might have been overall more anarchistic or more vaguely anti-establishment populist, not explicitly leftist, there's a lot to learn there because some of those independent records lasted for like 10, 15, 20, 25 years. Like those are significant accomplishments, and put out records that got to many people competing against big labels. Like, so it's no short feats, and it's something that we could really learn from. It's World War Z. I'm a zillennial. You know, I'm kind of between the millennial and Zoomer, right? And when I see it gets marketed like zillennials and Zoomers and stuff, it's very bougie. It's super. Yeah, I'm right on the line there. But it's super bougie stuff. You know, like obviously with mainstream hip hop and stuff like that, it's like really bougie stuff. And Bread Soup and all that, they talk about, oh, we got to combat the neo-Nazis. We got to combat the alt-right. The fact is, neo-Nazis are only going to appeal to a certain amount of people, right? Whereas the bourgeois pro-capitalist stuff has a much wider appeal because that's the default for many people's thinking. You know, even for working people, that's the default because that's the system that you're in. So yes, when that glorifies and glamorizes individual wealth, you know, people are gonna vibe to that because they think, oh, I want to get my bag, I want to be like looking fine and stuff, and like that resonates with people because they view that in the individualist liberal mindset as their way to lift themselves out of the situation that they're in, versus thinking about how do we create collective wealth, through something like a socialist project. So we really need to combat the pro-capitalist influencers, pop stars, and rappers and what have you. We need to be competing there because anybody can dunk on Nazis in debates. That doesn't take talent to do. It's very easy. But truly going up against the system, that's where we really need to be. And I think this is my first time actually talking about that on a stream. But it's something a lot of people just ignore.
We gotta come up with the cool communist punk band.
Yeah, I'm actually working on that with some people. We're thinking of making like kind of like a youth crew record and
nice
and bringing that sound. But my man Noah, who's actually might be on this project, he identifies how there are people that do YouTube, but how to make a banana split, who have like 1,000 times more followers than the biggest leftist channel.
Oh my God.
We need to put that in perspective, that these influencers who are showing off the latest handbags, who are showing off the latest tracksuits, those are the people that are competing with us for the message to the masses. It's not the Nazis. Okay. I mean, it's important to dunk on those people when it's fit. And in dissident circles, it's very relevant to, combat these like third positionist characters and whatnot.
Yeah.
But in terms of reaching the masses and what's going to be the dominant ideology, it really is capitalism versus socialism. The fascists, they just come in when the capitalists need them,
Yeah. We have to make brand communism. It's all a battle of narratives and brands, like at the end of the day, because humans as a society, we are based around symbols as a society. Like we've developed and grown around symbols, branding, music, our senses, right? And we have to create stuff that is appealing and interesting to the broad sectors of society. And I think that's something that our generation is lacking because we're overstimulated, over consuming. We have to become producers, and we have to know what really captivates the hearts and minds of people. And one thing, I think that's a great point about like how music videos promote individualism and stuff, because I've noticed like a lot of dudes I grew up with in New York, working class dudes, good people, right? They're not like bad people, but they'll see these hip hop videos and these capitalist videos, and they'll want to recreate the lifestyle that these rappers and artists have in the videos that are not even real to begin with. A lot of these people, they're renting out Bugattis for the day. They take out all their savings in cash so that they could hold the bands like this. They'll hire IG models. They're not even their real friends, but they create this illusion. Like you watch this music video and it's like dudes chilling at the pool with like stacks of money. That's like debt. With like women they just hired through IG.
Some of these dudes, they're not even that fit or attractive or anything. They're just like, like they got the more edgy look that the label needs or whatever.
Exactly. And it creates this false illusion where we see that on the screen and we're like, oh shit, that's real. Like some people are really living like that. And then we're like, okay, I want to live like that. And so people reorient their whole life around like, I need that Bugatti. I need that IG model,
You see that too with the promotion of stuff like horizontal violence, which gets nobody nowhere. And in hardcore music, like that violence, that's actually a really big. It was at varying points big issues at shows and stuff. And like my favorite band, Verse, like the dude Sean, he grew up in the projects, like he grew up in the hood and had like he was at weekend shows like fighting Nazis like every weekend and stuff. Like he was like a for real dude. And then as he grew up, as the scene got a little bit safer, you got some fake tough guys coming in, some skinny dudes, but they're wearing tank tops and stuff that think they're like moshing and stuff. And he said, hey, if you went out on the street, you wouldn't be doing any of that. You'd be crying to a cop, like you have people that come in that think, oh, hardcore, just moshing and being fit in martial arts. And it's like, martial arts doesn't even encourage people to randomly fight anyway. But, like this glorification of horizontal violence and that's the idea of manhood is just really detrimental. And we definitely need artists getting in there and saying like, people hurting each other, class violence towards each other is terrible. And and you see hip hop and And then like some more like beat down, tough guy, hardcore, just really cement these ideas of just like that. It's just concrete jungle out there, and like, it's like I got mine on top. Like don't mess with my turf. And it's like, it's like, yeah, your turf. Like what is that? Like 2 meters in like an alley. Like that's nothing, And then meanwhile the elites are just laughing away at the bank, laughing at all of us like we're a bunch of fools in this anthill, just like eating each other or whatever.
Literally, it's crazy. And I feel like a lot of times that even translates into the left with a lot of these ultras who they watch too many movies, right? They watch too many Hollywood movies, and they also see a lot of images of revolutionaries in other countries who have, rightly so, use armed struggle to come to power, to defend their people. But it's not anything that's glorious or fun. Like living under armed struggle is very horrible and violent, and it sucks, and a lot of like younger people or ultra lefts who talk shit about like people who just want like progress and peace and constructive socialists, they see these images of guns and violence, and it's kind of like the hip hop videos where they want to live the life of these millionaires. Well, a lot of these kind of internet ultras, they want to live the life of people who went through horrible shit, and don't want to live that.
Right.
And they recreate it. So it's like, all of it, like music, movies, media, it influences so much in our minds, in our movements, in our people. And we have to really be cognizant about that, because I feel like a lot of the divisions are based on how people view themselves. Like people, in some of my friends that I grew up with in Queens and in the hood, like they're like, they see these music videos and they're like, I need to be that person. I'm going to be that person. And that's their whole identity is around that. And I've seen that also with some of my friends on the left, like who are really into like assuming this identity of like this guerrilla fighter in the, what I'm saying? It just gets like, it's very interesting to see that,
Yeah, it's definitely like, because you talk to like real like Sandinista revolutionaries who lived through that, and like who wants to be looking over their shoulder all the time, wonder if they're getting like blown the heck out,
Right.
Like, nobody wants to live like that, It's like the quote, like communists pick up the gun to put down the gun. Like people, and that's something too. With imperialism, fascism, what have you, their system is built, this unsustainable system is sustained through just constant bloodshed, constant destruction. Whereas socialism, that's not productive.
Right.
When you're fighting, you're not building. But sometimes you got to fight. But, you want to build. That's at the core of it. You want to be left alone, And I think Michael Parenti's term that he coined, I believe he coined it, siege socialism, is a really good one for people understanding, the authoritarianism of that socialist states. They got to go on lockdown, they got to get militant sometimes to protect and defend the revolution. But that's the thing. Socialism, they're only being militant when it's to do revolution or defend the revolution. Otherwise, they're building, That's where it's at. That's where everybody wants to be at. And that's why your documentary was so powerful when I watched it. Because that's what I want to get at a socialism. Like, I'm not into this wacko ultra PPW LARPing and stuff. Like I like when I see people growing food, when I see people like taking their kids to the playground, and it's just having a good Saturday, and it's sunny, and people are relaxed. There's no garbage or crime. It's like that's the society we want to build. And that's what my man Sean from Verse said to the kids on Moshin. He's like, I grew up with violence. Like, I don't want to see violence at the show. Like, this is a release, this aggressive music, but like, stop trying to LARP like you grew up in the hood when you didn't. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And like those tendencies, like I see, like, because I like, like when I grew up, I was born in the city like as a kid, but moved out to a town like pretty early on in life and stuff. So like, I don't pretend to be any more hardcore than I actually am. But I see so many people who just live probably in a pretty low key town that are trying to act like they're in the middle of this like concrete jungle urban warfare. And it's like, like, it's like, I don't know, surrounding yourself with more violence doesn't make you more revolutionary. Like, exactly. I think people that think it does. It's like what we said about like the hip hop or the beat down tough guy stuff. It's like that's not what masculinity or being revolutionary is. But
Right.
People that are brainwashed with these action movies and their false sense of machismo.
Yeah, they fall for the spells, and music is a big part of it. Comrade, I gotta dip out, but it was really great to talk to you, man. I think we hit a lot of different topics, but it's all connected with like the role of music in imperialist propaganda, because music is what shapes our ideas, our views, our mindset, what we like, what we don't like. It frames how we view things positively or negatively. And I think contrasting these two sets of videos, DPRK, North Korea on the one hand, and the quote unquote state of Israel on the other, was good. Anything coming up, folks, everybody should subscribe to Ewoks Unhinged. Please subscribe to his channel. Anything you want to put out there that's coming up? Or
Hey, thanks so much, man. I just want to say thanks for hosting me. Real honor to be on for episode 10 of Unmasking Imperialism.
No doubt.
I think it was really great. We got into how the capitalist hegemony repackages and appropriates like dissident energy in these dissident genres. I'm really glad we talked about that, because it's a real force and it really misdirects people. I actually said earlier on that some leftists called punk fascists, and I disagree with that, but I do agree that it's a trap for dissident energy, because if you just stay in this scene, it's just like building a commune with your friends. It's like you're not changing the system at large, and we want to pull people out of these traps and get their energy going in the right direction. And I feel like these streams that we do, man, like I always feel like we're like getting a step closer to there each time with directing that positive energy towards truly revolutionary change, which comes from a constructivist mindset. Ewoks has got me and Ramiro and some more comrades. We're going to be doing a stream on the topic of common histories of the Americas coming up. It's going to be really good, and it's going to be talking about just like these whole continents and what we can learn truly from the Latin American revolutionary tradition. And because America could use it, Canada could use it. So I'm really looking forward to that, man. Thanks for having me on, and can't wait to see more of your series.
No doubt, comrade. It was a pleasure. We got to come up with that commie punk band name, by the way. We'll start coming up with some ideas. Maybe y'all could put some in the chat.
There's a genre of hardcore called Youth Crew, which came from that straight edge scene. So I nicknamed Verse Rev Crew, because I feel like it's like revolutionary youth crew. So I feel like we could call the record like Rev Crew 21 or something like that.
Rev Crew.
Go from there. Yeah.
Rev Crew 1917 or something like that.
Hey, that's good.
We'll come up with some names. But yeah, comrade, peace out. It was a pleasure talking with you, and I hope everything's well. Peace out, everybody. Thank you for watching and listening.
Cheers.